Jill and Stacy show.
We have TJ Roberts, State Rep District 66, here with us today. We wanted to talk to him about his first week in Frankfort. How'd it go, TJ?
I think it went very well. Luckily, we were able to get an income tax through the cut through the House. We also had several bills introduced, and I'm very happy with the bill that I was able to propose, particularly getting one bill up to priority status with House Resolution 2 to vindicate the tax cut that we all worked so hard for in 2024 that Andy Beshear has decided to illegally disregard and direct his administrative state to continue to collect on.
Oh, so you guys already passed that?
No, so we passed a tax cut in 2024.
Yeah.
So this went into the budget. We explicitly exempted from the sales and use tax any purchases of gold or silver or other types of bullion, and that's KRS 139.480 subsection 37. You can look this up. This tax cut is still on the books as we sit here today, and yet Andy Beshear put in this directive to his Department of Revenue to just continue collecting the taxes anyway.
Wow.
So it's a particularly egregious issue where even if you are in theory against exempting gold and silver from the sales and use taxes, if you still think that that should be taxed, well, you should go to the legislature and ask that this tax exemption be repealed. You don't go to the governor and ask him to engage in an administrative veto of a duly enacted law. So this bill demonstrates that we've had enough, that separation of powers matters in Kentucky, and the governor doesn't get to write the law. So what House Bill 2 does is, one, it reaffirms the existence of the sales tax exemption, that this is not a legitimate tax. You don't have to pay taxes on gold and silver. Then further, it makes it where if you have been taxed dating back to the date of enactment, so August 1st, 2024, you are entitled to a refund on the tax that you paid, including pre and post judgment interest. You are also entitled to injunctive relief. So an order from the court directing the government to stop collecting these taxes, your attorney fees. So in other words, you shouldn't have to pay for the attorney to get this moving. Andy Beshear is going to pay for it. Further, liquidated damages of $1,000 for each day that the tax was collected on, which is paid from the administrative budget, from the Finance and Administration Cabinet, the Department of Revenue, or the Office of the Governor. So in other words, the governor's office, the executive branch, is responsible for this. So it's coming out of their budget that has already been apportioned. So they're going to have to figure out where the spending cuts are going to have to come from to make up for however much this is. And by the way, this is a class action enabling statute too. So everyone who has purchased any bullion is included on this and is entitled to this type of relief. So this is an extremely, extremely strong bill to make clear that we're done with Andy Beshear acting like a king.
Oh, thank God. Well, I guess we're just going to jump right into these House bills.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about HB1?
We can. So House Bill 1, that is just a simple income tax cut. As of right now, the income tax in Kentucky is 4%. After HB1 becomes law, it'll be 3.5%. This is just another step in our direction toward a complete and total abolition of the income tax. I made clear throughout my campaign that if there is an opportunity to cut taxes, I'm voting for it. And this bill does that. So I was a hard yes on it.
Awesome. What about HB 15?
So House Bill 15 is a bill to make it to where people can receive their instruction permit to learn how to drive at the age of 15 instead of 16.
Oh.
We're one of the only states that doesn't even allow it for the age of 15. This just puts us onto what most of the country is doing. I think it's a common sense bill, so I was happy to co-sponsor it. It's just an all around good bill.
Yeah, Ohio has been doing that forever.
Yep.
Get your permit at 15. HB 16, the fluoridation programs.
So this is Mark Hart's bill to allow for local governments to decide whether or not they require fluoride in our water. We're one of the few states that's still required at the state level, and this is once again just trying to make that simple reform to send it to the local level.
HB 22.
So that is John Hodgson's bill to prevent geoengineering in Kentucky, whether it's cloud seeding or any other issues. the reality is this is that we shouldn't have people trying to artificially manipulate the weather in Kentucky. And this bill is Representative Hodgson's way of trying to prevent that. And I was happy to put my name on the bill.
So what happens if they do, if this bill passes and they continue to put something in the atmosphere? Because it says criminal atmospheric pollution, criminal.
Yes, it leads to a criminal fine of not less than $500,000. In addition to any other penalty authorized by law, it's also a Class D felony. So 1 to 5 years in jail is authorized. So those are the big penalty provisions in this bill.
Nice. Okay, HB 25.
House Bill 25 is a bill that requires government schools at the start of each school day to have a moment of silence. It further makes clear that instructors or employees are not to tell the student what they are to reflect on during moments of silence. It's ultimately just a means to offer that opportunity for people to give this area. So I'm specifically, it also requires notification to be sent to the parents or guardians on this policy to encourage the parents to have that conversation with their children of what should they be reflecting on. I think it's a very powerful bill to just ensure that there's a greater family connection on spiritual matters than we currently have in Kentucky.
I love it. You know, I just learned in church of all places that back in 1981, it was Steve Bashir, Andy's daddy, was our AG, and he got the 10 Commandments removed from like 20,000 school locations.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, he did. And there's a bill to bring it back, especially after the Lemon test was overturned in the Supreme Court. And I'm a co-sponsor of that bill too, which we will discuss down the line.
yes. All right. HB 26.
So House Bill 26 is very simple. No income taxes on overtime or on tips.
Oh, love it. Thank you, TJ.
Absolutely.
HB 27.
So House Bill 27 makes clear that our ban on homeowners associations prohibiting political signs, that applies to all planned communities in the Commonwealth, including voiding any previously existing documents saying that you cannot express your fundamental right to political speech because of a homeowners association. Homeowners associations act like miniature kingdoms, and I think that there's absolutely no grounds for them to think that they can do what would otherwise be a blatant First Amendment violation. They want to act like a government. We're going to treat them like a government, and that's what House Bill 27 does. It just updates it, makes clear nowhere in the state can an HOA ban you from having political signage in your yard.
House Bill 41.
House Bill 41 is so let's be clear. Unfortunately, Kentucky has been hit with natural disasters rather extensively, and we have we have the ability to respond to our emergencies, but this enables it further by establishing a Kentucky Emergency Volunteer Corps, and that's part of our Kentucky State Defense Force. So this just gives more of an ability to respond to natural disasters, and with a totally dedicated force that kicks in when that happens. So that's what House Bill 41 does. It's another John Hodgson bill. Co-sponsorship is my way of saying this is such a good bill that if no one else had introduced it, I would have introduced it myself.
Right.
So it's a way of saying like there is a lot of support behind it. And House Bill 41 most certainly has a lot of names on it.
Yeah, some of our favorites.
Yes.
Right. House Bill 42.
So House Bill 42, this is an act of bipartisanship, by the way. A Democrat sponsored this bill. I co-sponsored because it's just such a good bill. All it does is it makes it to where if you are a registered child sex offender, you cannot participate in Halloween activities with children present. Can't hand out candy on Halloween for trick-or-treating purposes. You can't go to kids' costume parties. I'm shocked that this isn't already the law. It's such a common sense bill that as soon as I saw it was introduced, I immediately went to Representative Allen and said, like, hey, I know we're on the opposite side of the aisle here, but do you mind if I co-sponsor this bill?
Yeah, you would have thought that would be in their like probation papers or whatever if they were been released. That's interesting.
Yep.
And let's see. House Bill 56.
So House Bill 56 is Speaker Pro Tem Mead's bill to allow for Eastern Kentucky University to offer a Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine program. So right now, in order to get new professional degrees, doctoral programs, the more advanced degrees, universities have to go to the legislature for permission.
Wow.
I think it's unfortunate that they have to. I think that's something to. I think that I don't think universities should have to go for permission if they're able to get the student body who will pay the tuition to make it happen. I say go for it. But right now, the Council on Post-Secondary Education, frankly, they tend to suppress the comprehensive universities, such as the University of Kentucky and the University of Louisville. Those two, though, they just put them on a pedestal, basically let them do whatever they want. But the universities here, Northern Kentucky University, Eastern Kentucky University, all the comprehensive schools are based on the funding models, egregiously underfunded when you look at per student compared to how the University of Kentucky is funded. Can't open up new programs without us as legislators having to intervene. It's an outrageous proposition. So my general rule is if there's a bill to let a comprehensive university start a new program, I'm co-sponsoring it. That's just a general rule for me, because I think it's outrageous that they have to ask for our permission at all.
Right. And honestly, I think this is going to be very much needed in Kentucky, the osteopathic medicine. That's awesome. Let's see. HB 60, like in this one.
So House Bill 60 is the total exemption on the annual tax on vehicle ownership. Right now, 25 states have no taxes on vehicles after you purchase it. So if I lived in Ohio, I wouldn't have to pay property taxes on my vehicle every year. So this is just putting us with the 25 other states and making clear that we're not going to tax vehicle ownership. I mean, especially now when we look at how much vehicles have gone up in price, used and new. I mean, there's a war on vehicle ownership. It's amazing. There's been a war on home ownership for decades, and now they're expanding it to vehicle ownership. One of the things that's so unique about America is how generally accessible a car is for you to get to wherever you need to go in this country. And I would say it's part of the American dream at this point, especially in my generation. Home ownership is so unreachable. It's almost like the new American dream is car ownership instead. So this bill just helps protect it and make sure that people are able to afford to own their own vehicle.
HB 62.
So I'm going to combine these with House Bill 62 and House Bill 63.
Okay.
So there was two bills. Last year we had House Bill 11, which I will say motivations are good. The motivation was to prevent youth vaping. So that is a noble prospect. Nicotine is highly addictive. That said, the way that this bill did it was it banned any vape products that haven't received FDA approval. There's only 3 or 4 vape products that have received such approval. Almost all of them are owned by Big Tobacco. House Bill 11 is already having consequences where businesses are being shut down. They can't afford to continue with only 4 products because Speedway, Shell, they all sell those 4 products. The small businesses, they really make their profit by contracting with smaller manufacturers. And generally speaking, these guys don't want to sell to minors. So I would say that the actual pathway that we should have done was just make it more and increase the penalties, give an outline process of what you must do to verify the age of someone before they purchase. So House Bill 63 is a clean repeal of House Bill 11. House Bill 62, though, just delays House Bill 11 because right now there is a case in front of the Supreme Court of the United States to determine whether or not the FDA's current approval process is illegal under the Administrative Procedure Act and under the Due Process Clause. The Fifth Circuit, which is the circuit that contains Texas, is the circuit that actually struck the FDA approval down. So House Bill 62 simply says we're not going to implement House Bill 11 until the Supreme Court comes to a merits decision. And if they say that the FDA approval process is fine, then House Bill 11 goes into full effect. If they say it is not, then it repeals House Bill 11.
House Bill 64.
House Bill 64 simply repealed Andy Beshear's ridiculous executive order banning conversion therapy on minors. So conversion therapy, at least as I would define it, is when a licensed psychiatrist engages in a treatment plan to attempt to change the sexuality of a minor. The problem with Andy Beshear's executive order, one, is it came from the executive branch. You don't get to write the law in Kentucky if you're the executive branch. If Andy Beshear wanted to do this, he should have run for the legislature, and he should have introduced the bill and whipped the votes and got it through the committee process and passed the bill. He didn't. He just acted like a king and wrote the law, despite the fact that we have repeatedly rejected efforts, because the bills that have been introduced are so broadly written, it could be construed to ban preachers from saying that homosexuality is a sin if they're the minor in their audience. And that's just a basic fundamental tenet of Christianity, right? I mean, look, none of the people on this bill think it's ever acceptable to use physical contact with a minor to attempt to alter their sexuality one way or the other. So I would be more than happy to sign on to a bill that is narrow, that actually protects religious liberty and prevents unethical practices in the field of psychiatry. But it's not the governor's job to do that.
Right. I think it's great you guys are holding his feet to the fire on some of this.
Absolutely.
So, undoing his daddy's work, HB 65.
Yes. So House Bill 65 is the bill to allow for the display of the 10 Commandments on a wall in each and every public elementary and secondary school classroom in the Commonwealth. So that's what I was talking about. That's the bill to do that. Josh Calloway is the sponsor of that one. Oh, by the way, for House Bill 62, 63, Savannah Maddox is the sponsor of that. And for 64, Josh Calloway is the sponsor of that one as well.
Yes, we like them. You guys are doing great, by the way. We've interviewed Steve Rawlings and Marianne Proctor. We interviewed her yesterday. So just
Excellent.
so excited to have all you guys down there.
Thank you.
So HB 66.
So House Bill 66 is Josh Calloway's bill to ban the Council on Post-Secondary Education from putting in DEI metrics to approve new programs at universities. So right now, the Council on Post-Secondary Education requires various so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics before they will approve funding or new programs at public universities in Kentucky. I think the DEI programs, especially whenever they're talking about direct quotas based on the color of a student's skin, is flagrantly unconstitutional and has been unconstitutional since the 1970s when we struck down such quota programs in the Bakke case. Bakke is how that's spelled. Look, the Council on Post-Secondary Education is using your tax dollars to treat people differently based on the color of their skin. It has to stop. And House Bill 66 is one step to make sure that that stops. Yeah, so House Bill 70 is Vanessa Grossel's bill to expand the ability to be a dietitian in Kentucky. Right now, you have to go through the direct licensing program of Kentucky, even if you have a license in another state. So House Bill 70 pretty much makes it to where if you have a dietitian license in a different state, that license is acknowledged here in Kentucky. Right now, we have an outrageous level of occupational licensing requirements across the board that makes it much more difficult to make a living in Kentucky than it does in several other states. And we need blanket occupational licensing reform. And this is just one step in that direction.
I thought you had another bill about occupational licensing in general. Was there another one? Right here, HB 133?
Yeah, House Bill 133. That is Steve Doan's bill, and that's a universal occupational licensing reform bill. So that's just about for every occupation.
I love that. Other states are doing that. I've had people reach out to me from Ohio, actually just passed something like that, didn't they, last year?
They did, and that's the thing, is like right now, our requirements are very outdated, but the reality is that generally speaking, licensing requirements are getting more uniform. So as we go in that way, there really isn't any harm to just acknowledging it from other states.
Right. No, I agree with you because that's been one of the barriers for me operating in other states with my license is I have to go through their boards. Some of them require additional testing, and then you have to pay the additional fees. And some states really make you jump through a lot of hoops in order to get licensed in their state. So the more friendly we are to these licenses, the more practitioners are going to come here to work. So I love that. I think that's a great idea.
So House Bill 81 is a bill that I introduced. This bill is a much needed update to the administrative state in Kentucky. So the first thing it does, look, we saw firsthand how bad an out of control executive branch can be with COVID. They almost sent me to jail for going to church. They have harassed families and small businesses for doing what it took to stay afloat during COVID. And this bill does a few things. So the first thing it does is if you've lost a license, a permit, a certificate, or realistically any government benefit because you disobeyed one of Bashir's executive orders, this allows you to file an action in a circuit court to demand immediate reinstatement, and it directly entitles you to that. So it's just a way of saying 2020 was so long ago. It's time that we give the people their rights back on this. But it also makes sure that we don't have these problems ever again of just one man just obliterating liberty in Kentucky.
Right.
So, and it does a few things to do that. So first and foremost, it gives the Attorney General the authority to withdraw an administrative regulation that has been found deficient. So throughout the interim, we have an administrative regulation subcommittee where we as legislators are able to find regulations deficient. But that doesn't necessarily do away with them under our current statutory framework. I think that should change, and I understand that that's probably coming through the pipeline of if a regulation is found deficient, it's automatically down. But the way it works now is that if a regulation is found deficient, either the governor or the agency can, but does not have to, rescind the regulation. So mine is just a simple fix that gives the Attorney General the ability to withdraw that regulation too. I mean, realistically speaking, every administrative regulation is coming from either the governor or it is coming from someone who is appointed by the governor or hired by someone who is appointed by the governor. The governor's not going to withdraw his own agenda, no matter who it is. So the Attorney General is just a separate part of the executive branch that has its own separate election. So I think it makes sense to just break that up a little bit and be clear of the Attorney General also has that authority. Second, in the event that an executive branch agency or the governor imposes a regulation that further burdens the people. So if they do, so suppose there's a regulation that says you can only have 5 chicken farms in Kentucky. This is a hypothetical. This is not a real regulation, but just suppose that that is what the governor's agriculture department has decided to do. You can only have 5 chicken farms, but then they change it to 3. So it's a harsher restriction. The Attorney General automatically has the ability to review that requirement, at which point the Attorney General can accept, reject, or modify the regulation. So it's just a check on the ability of the executive branch to unilaterally impose requirements on people. So this is the same deal with COVID restrictions. If new regulations, if a lockdown order ever comes in, the Attorney General has review authority and can throw it out. And then most importantly, so people don't realize this, but in Kentucky's budget, we have a restriction that says that tax dollars cannot be used to enforce any COVID orders. The legislature put that in to try to put everything to rest. And Andy Beshear and his lackeys in the executive branch are flagrantly violating that. So this third provision says that if an executive branch agency intentionally violates a budget restriction, the agency head and any official participating in this violation are required to be removed from office and banned from holding any other office of trust or profit in Kentucky for 10 years. And by the way, that includes unemployment. A position of trust or profit from Kentucky includes benefits. Wow. So it's a 10-year ban from them having any of that. Sends a message that the legislature has the power of the purse. We control the spending. And we said no more tax dollars to COVID orders. Right now, the governor is using your tax dollars to harass families and small businesses. It has to stop. So House Bill 81, by the way, is actually the first bill I introduced, and I think it's fundamental.
Is Andy still in? Was it appeals court with some of the businesses over COVID?
There's some in appeals court. There's some in the circuit courts. I mean, there's some that are still in the executive branch hearing processes. I mean, the amount of it. I mean, it's actually hard to really. It's really hard to pin down exactly how many there are.
So he's just draining the individual at this point, using our tax dollars to.
Yeah, I mean, he's just engaging in a form of paper terrorism to make clear that maybe you'll win in the end, but I'm going to make sure that you're paying an attorney some ridiculous hourly rate for as long as humanly possible because he wants to punish you for daring to challenge his authority.
Oh, so gross.
It's egregious.
Yes. Well, good job, TJ. That's a good
Thank you.
Let's see, HB 82.
So House Bill 82 is a common sense measure. Josh Bray got a Second Amendment Preservation Act signed into law that says that no federal gun laws are to go into effect and are to be enforced by anyone that is a state agent in Kentucky or local. And if you try to enforce a federal gun law, you will be removed from your position. And this one dated to January 1st, 2021. Now, after that bill was enacted and became law, the Supreme Court came down with the Bruin decision that says that we are to analyze Second Amendment law based on the history and tradition of our Second Amendment precedent. This bill takes that and just changes the date. Instead of January 1st, 2021, we're going back to December 15th, 1791, which is the day that the Second Amendment was ratified. So I'm taking Bruin's decision literally, and I'm making sure that we don't wind up in federal court because we have an agent enforcing an unconstitutional gun control measure.
Is this one that you wrote yourself too?
Yes.
Good job, TJ.
Yep, this is one of my bills. So all of the bills that have a star on them on this website are the ones that I am either the sponsor or the primary co-sponsor on. Everything else are bills that I co-sponsored.
Oh, okay. So let's see, HB 83.
So House Bill 83 bans red flag orders, and it bans judges from imposing them, and it bans anyone from enforcing them. So we don't authorize it under the law, and frankly, the Constitution would never authorize it. But this is just a preventative measure, just to be clear. We're not doing red flag laws in Kentucky.
Well, it seems like the federal government sometimes just goes off the rails. So I like that you guys are concerned about making sure our state's constitutional and that we're protected.
Absolutely.
HB 84.
So House Bill 84 is an anti-global government measure. A lot of the COVID orders that we saw were inspired by directives from the World Health Organization. I was making clear that the World Health Organization has no jurisdiction in Kentucky. It has no jurisdiction in America. And if the Cabinet for Health and Family Services attempts to implement or enforce a directive from the World Health Organization, they're guilty of a Class D felony.
I just really hope these bills pass, TJ. I'm so excited. All right, HB 85.
So House Bill 85 is sanitation district reform. Right now, there are sanitation districts that are able to charge individuals that they never actually serviced. So pretty much this just makes clear the sanitation districts cannot charge you a financial charge unless you are a customer of them, you have a contract, or you received some sort of benefit from them, or you are causing them some sort of harm. So those are the things that those are the only things that I am that this bill does. It just makes clear no contract, no requirement to pay. The way it should be.
Yeah. Let's see, HB 86.
So House Bill 86 was is another one of my bills. All it does is it just says that you cannot ban raw milk in Kentucky. It's a basic food freedom bill, or as I call it, drink freedom.
Yeah, I know people who do cow shares so that they can get raw milk.
Yes. Yeah, and that's legal right now in Kentucky, but what's not legal is you can't go to a store and get it.
Yeah, who wants to eat the whole cow?
Right. So this is legal, by the way, in Oregon, in Washington, and California. We have a harsher regulation on food freedom than three of the most liberal states in the nation. It makes no sense to me. So now House Bill 86, I plan on working on it as well through the committee substitute and floor amendment process to have various protections to make sure that there's a degree of economic freedom in there. I'm looking at Florida and West Virginia's models primarily on how they do raw milk. So those are my plans at the moment. So we have House Bill 141. I'm a primary co-sponsor to that one. That's Defend the Guard. I think this is one of the most important bills that we can run right now because we haven't declared war since World War II, and National Guardsmen sign up to defend the home front. And despite that, over financial incentives to the federal government, we have since Bill Clinton been using the National Guard to fight undeclared wars more than we are the other branches that sign up with the full knowledge of potential deployment. Defend the Guard simply says you cannot deploy National Guardsmen for combat purposes unless Congress does their job and declares war. And these guys sign up to put their life on the line. The least we can do for our soldiers is give them the respect that they deserve by following our constitutional processes. So if we're asking these people to fight and possibly die for us, that we're putting the actual term war behind it, and we're giving them everything that they need in that foreign war. It's one of the most important bills that we can do, and I am 100% committed to getting that across the finish line. Tulsi Gabbard has endorsed it. Pete Hegseth has endorsed it. I mean, that is the top brass of our military complex right now, saying this needs to happen. House Bill 142 is Marianne Proctor's bill to ban squatting and make it a felony and allow for the immediate removal of squatters. I'm a primary co-sponsor because I've seen how outrageous squatting is. I mean, you have no right to steal someone's home. You have no right to do it. And it is easier, and I can say this as an attorney who does eviction on the side along with the constitutional law practice. It is easier to evict a tenant than it is to evict a squatter.
Oh, wow.
I have done both, and I can tell you every time it is easier to evict a tenant who has a contract with a landlord than it is to evict a squatter. House Bill 143 is a basic is one of my bills. Jason Nemes, also primary co-sponsored this bill. This bill just makes clear that our anti-riot legislation. By the way, Kentucky is the only state in the country that has this. We have an affirmative duty of cities to put a stop to riots if they know that those riots are happening. Louisville failed to do that in 2020. That city was burned to the ground, and there was a stand down order from their corrupt mayor. And I say he's corrupt, and the reason why I say he's corrupt is while he had that stand down order telling police not to interfere with the destruction of private property, he ordered them to get cement trucks to block access to his own home. So he knew full well, he knew full well what was going on. He just didn't care. My boss and I, we sued Louisville over this on behalf of some small businesses. And we lost on the argument that this ridiculous argument that Louisville made, claiming that they are not a city.
What? Wow.
Yes. So, and the Court of Appeals affirmed it. The case is currently pending before the Supreme Court. Now, to be clear, House Bill 143 doesn't undo this loss if this loss is sustained. I think the law already would say that Louisville's liable. This has been the law since the 1850s, and it was designed to target Louisville because they previously refused to interfere in a riot back in the 1850s. All this bill does is it changes our anti-riot law from cities to local government, just specifying every local government in Kentucky has a duty to put a stop to riots. I think it's the most common sense bill, and it's amazing that no other state has it.
They're taking tax dollars to protect the city, right?
Correct. Right. So that's my take on it. This makes clear you cannot dodge this liability that KRS 411.100 imposes upon you. House Bill 169 is my bill to make school board races partisan.
Yay!
My simple explanation of this bill is this: if school boards want to engage in illegal electioneering, if school boards want to engage in using your tax dollars for lobbying purposes, they are partisan hacks. And if school boards want to act like partisan hacks, parents have the right to treat them like partisan hacks in the election. And by the way, this is probably the most mild bill that I'm considering right now in terms of K through 12 reform. I have more in the pipeline.
Did you get our email?
I did. Oh, I have some ideas. House Bill 175 just is my bill to remove the governor and the lieutenant governor's names from our Welcome to Kentucky signs.
Awesome.
And it's great red meat for the people who don't like Andy Beshear, but this is a permanent reform, and I'll be level. I think it's waste and inefficient to change these signs every 4 to 8 years.
Right.
I don't care who the governor is. It shouldn't be on our signs. We shouldn't be wasting tax dollars on that.
True.
House Bill 176 is my means of nullifying the tax on the national that is imposed on gun owners through the National Firearms Act. So right now, if you purchase what is classified as a short-barreled rifle, which is a politically defined term of a rifle with a barrel length less than 16 inches, you have to pay a $200 tax. If you manufacture one, you have to pay a $200 tax. And if you're a business that sells, you have an annual tax of $500 to $1,000. Same thing with suppressors, same thing with machine guns, same things with any other weapon categories. This bill makes it to where if you pay that federal tax, we as a state government will give you a dollar-to-dollar tax refund on your income tax return. And look, I get it that this could be considered a handout, but if there's any role of state government, it is to alleviate the people of the pains of an overreaching federal government. Right. I can't get rid of the wait period that you have to go through in order to get something that you use to lawfully defend yourself and your family and your home. But what I can do is I can make the financial burden a little less bad. And that's what House Bill 176 is. And by the way, I'm not done with getting rid of taxes related to firearms. There will be a bill introduced on the first day whenever we get back into session. House Bill 177 is my update to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So right now, our Religious Freedom Restoration Act is weaker than the federal one, and the federal one is actually quite weak. So my bill gives a process for vindicating your rights, getting your attorney fees back, and also compensatory and even compensatory damages, and in limited situations, punitive damages with a waiver of qualified immunity in the event of an intentional violation of religious liberty. The intentional violations are defined of if there's published case law in Kentucky or in our federal courts, then it's intentional. You're on notice. You should know that this is protected. Or if someone pursues an advisory opinion from the attorney general that says, hey, this government actor is doing this. I believe it's a religious liberty violation. What do you think? And if the attorney general says, yes, it is, and the government agent continues with their behavior, they're waiving qualified immunity as well. Qualified immunity is just a shield from accountability for violating constitutional rights. It has its place with split-second decision makings, for example, but whenever you have the time to call up a lawyer and say, hey, is this legal? I don't think you should be able to do this. I think we're at a point where we know full well that taking adverse government action against someone because of their religion is completely and totally unacceptable. So that's House Bill 177. And then House Bill 199, which I primary co-sponsored with Candy Massaroni. This bill makes clear that if you rape a child under the age of 12, the death penalty is on the table for you. Now, the liberals are freaking out saying, I'm trying to violate the Eighth Amendment here. But I think we have the votes to overturn Kennedy v. Louisiana in the Supreme Court. I think that Kennedy v. Louisiana's day has come. If you rape a child, the government should have every right to kill you.
Agreed.
Then there's House Bill 204. This is a bill I primary co-sponsored with Savannah Maddox. All this bill says is that if you're able to carry a concealed license in public elsewhere, public universities cannot ban you from carrying a concealed handgun on their premises. It's campus carry. Look, there are plenty of people who are able to carry concealed at these universities, and the Constitution does not end at the schoolhouse gates. And so campus carry is a must. Then House Bill 213 is a bill I filed with Steve Doan. This bill bans sanctuary cities in Kentucky. And by the way, there are 4 counties in Kentucky that are non-compliant with ICE detainer policies as it presently stands. They are releasing illegal immigrants despite ICE detainers existing. One of them is in northern Kentucky, by the way. It's Campbell County.
What?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. So there's 4. There are 4 sanctuary counties in Kentucky. One of them is explicit about it. Louisville is very explicit that they will not comply with ICE detainers without very specific requirements that federal law does not allow them to do. So this bill bans these sanctuary policies and makes clear that if a local government releases someone and that person turns around and injures or kills a Kentuckian, that local government is liable for the damages caused. They're lucky this bill doesn't have the people who released them charged as accessories to murder, frankly.
Right. Yeah.
The people who failed Lake and Riley, as far as I'm concerned, morally, they're accessories to murder, and it's a shame the law doesn't treat them as such. So those are all the bills that I have introduced so far, but there is a House Joint Resolution. I introduced House Joint Resolution 8 to rename the portions of Kentucky Highway 18 that has not been renamed to the President Donald J. Trump Highway in Boone County.
And liberals' heads explode.
Oh, they are so mad. The last time the Democrats were this mad, had a bearded politician who was born in Kentucky. He was taking their slaves away.
Oh my gosh. I saw that and I'm like, oh, heads are exploding right now.
I am on the Judiciary Committee, the Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Protection Committee, and the Elections, Constitutional Amendments, and Intergovernmental Affairs Committee.
Awesome. That's a lot for a new member, right?
It is, and those are pretty high-level committees, too. I was very honored to be put on those.
Use your brain and do your research.